All right, how to shoot a motion time lapse on the RS3 Mini. Let's go. All right, so first of all, you want to make sure that, I'm assuming if you bought the RS3 Mini, that you know you already have a camera that's already going to be set up properly for the RS3 Mini as far as not having like too much of a payload. I can't remember what the exact number was for payload, but that's in my last RS3 Mini video, so you can check that out. You go to their website, actually, you can actually like check to see which kind of camera you're using, which kind of lens you're using with that camera, and see if it's okay or compatible with your actual device. And then, so it'll tell you whether or not your camera's compatible with Bluetooth, and then it'll also tell you like what controls that the Bluetooth function will actually have, and then what further functions you'll actually gain by using the RSS feed cable and plugging from the RS3 Mini directly into your camera. So I went ahead and did that for my Canon RP, which I'm using right now to shoot this angle you're watching. If I use Bluetooth, I'll have some functionality as far as being able to stop and start a recording and take a still image. Plug in your cable, put it in one-shot autofocus, and then you shouldn't have any problems with your time lapse that you're gonna be shooting, because it has to be able to pull focus in order for it to get your camera to focus every time it takes a still image for the time lapse. So that's why I couldn't do it through Bluetooth. And I don't know if every camera's like that or if it's just the Canon RP or what it is, but yeah, go to the website, it'll tell you if you're compatible, if your setup's compatible or not, and then it'll tell you what functionality you have with Bluetooth and without Bluetooth. Hooking up the cable was the best option. All right, so from there, before you hook up the app and all that stuff, you got to think about your time lapse from a video or a photography standpoint. You got to have some understanding of, okay, what is this gonna look like? You may be the type of person that just wants to set it and forget it, and that's fine. You can set it in auto or whatever, and that's cool. But for me, I like to really dial in my look that I'm going for. So say you want a time lapse that is really, really choppy, kind of like a stop motion. It just kind of looks like fast forwarded video. A lot of people like that look. So you could just set it for a super high shutter speed. And then once it takes a still image, it's going to capture that exact, every frame is going to be super crisp. So then when it plays back, it'll be like a fast motion video. Or if you want a lot of motion blur, to kind of give it like that hyperlapse feel, then you want to run a slower shutter speed. That way there you have some motion blur. So if you're shooting like an intersection of cars or something like that, right? And you want some motion blur of those vehicles driving by, then you'd set your shutter speed accordingly and all that, so that every time it takes a still image for your time lapse, then you have a little bit of motion blur. So then when you put that time lapse all together, you have this super sweet hyperlapse look that's got motion blur and all this stuff. So yeah, in a nutshell, you want to make sure that you are thinking about all those type of stuff. And like I said, if you're the type of person that just wants to set it and forget it, you can put it in auto and you won't have to worry about it. Other than that, if you want to really dial it in, put your camera in manual, lock in your shutter speed, lock in your ISO, lock in your aperture, figure out the settings that you want. Make sure your start and ending point, that you're not gonna have one section that's like super overexposed or underexposed and all that stuff. And you can just kind of gauge that while you're out in the field. You can point it one way, and then where the ending is gonna point it that way, and just make sure that all your values in the camera are gonna be looking good and that your histogram's not all crazy. But yeah, so outside of all that, if you got all that locked in, your setup's good for the RS3 Mini, you're compatible with it, you got the cable hooked up, you got all your settings right, and then you have all your camera settings right for your actual photos that you're gonna be taking for the time lapse. Now we hook up the app to the RS3 Mini and we start using this thing. You wanna hook up your RSS feed cable from the front side of the RS3 Mini, and then the other side is going to plug right into wherever it plugs into your camera. That way it gives the RS3 Mini full functionality of whatever it needs to for your camera. That way you can pull focus every time. Because every time it's gonna take a still image for your time lapse, it needs to pull focus first and then snap it. Pull focus, then snap it. Pull focus, then snap it. So it needs to be able to have that control, and it may not be able to do that through Bluetooth. So I recommend for sure use that RSS feed cable. And then from there, it's time to set our waypoint. So at the bottom of the screen on the app, it'll say enabled push mode. As long as it says enabled, then all you gotta do is for your first point where you wanna start your motion time lapse, you just you grab the camera, you move it physically, you move it on the RS3 Mini and point it into the direction where you wanna start. And then you hit the plus. That's gonna set your first waypoint. And now you can set however many waypoints you want. Just move it to the spots that you want to end up at every certain point that you want that. So you can, if you're just doing 2 waypoints, you want it to start here and start there. You have the starting waypoint, which is 1, and the ending waypoint, which is 2. Now, if you want to, go from here to there, and then back, and then down, and then up, and then back to the start, then you'd have, like 4 of them. And you just got to make sure you move the camera, add it, move the camera, add it. So then it records all that motion and where it needs to land on those spots, right? Then you're also going to want to change the actual time-lapse settings. So you're going to choose your frames per second. If say you're going to be putting this time-lapse on a 24 frames per second timeline or a 60 FPS timeline, whatever time-lapse you're shooting, you can set that FPS for what you want it to be in the end result. So that way you say, okay, I want this time-lapse to be a 24 frames per second video, or I want this time-lapse to be 60 frames per second. That way it's gonna know, okay, the start to finish in 20 minutes, however you set the time, it's gonna say, okay, if it's 60 frames per second, it'll do the math and it'll say you're gonna have this many still images and it's gonna be this many seconds long and all that stuff. Photo interval, so you can actually change how many photos you take in a certain interval of time. So like it sets it default for 2 seconds. It'll snap a photo every 2 seconds, but you can also set it for if you want to set every 5 seconds, every 10 seconds, every 20 seconds. It's up to you. It just depends on how long you're gonna go and what the look is that you're trying to go for. And you can play around with it, do a couple of different types of motion time lapses to see what the different interval types are gonna get you. You know, it's gonna be either smooth or it's gonna be choppy. So the more photos you take, the more frames you're adding to the time-lapse video, right? So then it's gonna be more of a smooth type of video, or if you want it to be super fast, really choppy, you can do every 10 seconds, every 15 seconds, and then if it's gonna be a longer stretch of time, that's what I would do. If you're gonna be filming something for hours on end, yeah, do 15, 20-second intervals or whatever, and then it'll be crazy looking, which is cool. If that's the look you're going for, you can change that setting is the point. So, and then you can actually change the time-lapse length. So if you know you're gonna be recording this time-lapse, you're like, okay, I got 20 minutes, I wanna record a time-lapse for the next 20 minutes, or I wanna record for the next 60 minutes, hour and a half, whatever it might be, you can change the time-lapse length, right? So all these things you can change. You're gonna change your frames per second for your time-lapse, change your interval that's gonna snap the photos, and how much the time your actual time-lapse is going to take to record, how much time you're gonna be recording this time-lapse. And then it's gonna spit out a number, say, okay, say you're doing a 20-minute time-lapse, 2 seconds interval for every photo, and you're set 24 frames per second, and then it's gonna say, okay, I'm gonna take 550 photos, and your video is gonna end up being 7 seconds long. So it'll say that at the bottom of the screen when you change all these things, which is good information, because if you were shooting a time lapse and you know ahead of time, okay, I'm gonna shoot a time lapse for this part of my video, but I don't want it to be 20 seconds. I want the thing to be 3 seconds, or I want it to be 6 seconds. Then you know, okay, I can adjust my settings to where I just get a 6-second time lapse that gets spit out when I go and put it in DaVinci or Premiere or whatever you're putting it in later. It makes it a lot less of a headache. So then after you have all that stuff locked in, all you literally have to do is hit start, and then it'll go to the first waypoint, and it'll start snapping photos until it gets all the way down to the end. And then you take all those photos off your SD card and toss them in whatever editing software you're going to be using. We're going to be using DaVinci today, so let's run over to DaVinci, and then we'll see how to put these time-lapse photos together. We're going to open up DaVinci. We're going to start a new project. All right, title it whatever, if I can spell, time-lapse. Okay, now, and then come up to DaVinci at the top, preferences. We're going to click user, and then editing. We're going to come down to general settings, and then standard still duration. We're going to choose frames, and then so change it from seconds to frames, and then delete it and select 1. So basically what it's doing is making every single image 1 frame. You gotta make sure that they're not raw images, because I always set my camera to raw when it's taking still images. So all these images are actually raw, so now I gotta convert them. That's why I couldn't find them in DaVinci. So I'm converting them over to JPEGs now, so make sure that make sure when you're shooting the time lapse on your camera, make sure they're shooting in JPEG. Okay, now we're converted. So once you have all your photos and they're actually JPEGs, you can drop those into DaVinci. Now all those photos will actually play like a video. So if you have a whole bunch of consecutive photos, then it will play like a video. And if you have photos that are like in a numerical order range, so they go from, so like these photos could range from 7,043 to 7,242. So each photo has a number, and it's gonna automatically make sure that all those photos are in order. So it'll do all that stuff for you. So we'll go up to the edit tab. I'll just drag this on the timeline, and instead of 200 photos, you see that it's just 1 video clip. If I get over here, it's just 1 video clip. If I play it, it plays them all just like that. And that's the motion time lapse. That is how you do a motion time lapse on the RS3 Mini. If you guys have any questions, comments, anything like that, please put them in the comment box below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.